Welcome to Shout on TV Watchmen, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series Watchmen. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside here are my two co-hosts, the King Bee.
Hello.
And Roger Roper.
Quis custodius ipsos custodes.
Very nice. And this is our episode 1 Instacast, where we look back on the premiere of Watchmen and provide our immediate reactions and thoughts. This week's episode, the first of the series, was entitled It's Summer and We're Running Out of Ice. Guys, what'd you think?
Well, it's been a long time since we've had anything decent worth watching on TV, and it looks like we're not getting a light start. There was some heavy, real gut-wrenching visuals right off the bat.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, King B. We had cautious optimism for the show. And I think that people were, over the summer when we watched The Boys, I remember Big D texting me and being like, oh, I think The Boys is going to be better than the Watchmen show. I got to say, I don't know if you guys have seen The Boys. I think, King B, you said you've seen The Boys, right, on Amazon Prime?
Trash.
I think this makes The Boys look like trash, 100%. I haven't been this excited for a series since the first episode of Westworld, which was, 4 years ago now? Almost 4 years ago?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the stuff that we were talking about is like, how does this compare to other comic book shows? Is this riding on the wave of comic book fandom and how comics are really big in movies and on TV? This felt a lot more like The Leftovers to me than it did a comic book series. It's got that trademark Lindelof feel to it. And it's got me both excited and worried. Excited in the sense that there's a lot of potential for this show and they're really creating a universe. I'm a little worried that the average audience, and this is going to sound very snobby, but this is going to connect with the average audience.
Well, I mean, that was the issue with Westworld, right? Is like it became the show of that fall where everyone. It was kind of the nerdy show that eventually made it into mainstream. And I wonder if Watchmen's going to have that similar effect because, like you said, it's that blend of comic book movie, but it has a Leftovers feel to it. And Lindelof, and for fans of Lost, there's a little bit of that going on with it. But I feel like so far, a lot of the worriment around the show was, is it going to stay true to the comic book universe, or is it going to be more of the Snyder universe? And it really truly is kind of in my opinion, it's kind of a blend of the two, but more on the good side of that, whichever you describe as the good side of it, it's the good side.
Yeah, Raj, I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it right there. But, we saw the Watchmen movie over 3 hours long. And I feel like after one episode of the series, I know more about the people, at least, like Sister Knight, like Judd. Like, I feel like I know more about them. They're more human to me. King B, you mentioned during this preview for the series that you were kind of looking for that evolution as well in a television series about comic book characters.
I mean, comic book movies and TV and everything kind of, in my opinion, is slowly aiming towards like the lowest common denominator. They want the most palatable product to hit the masses. And, someone had mentioned earlier just now about, is this show going to be riding the wave? And I really hope it's rather steering the ship towards something that is a little bit more three-dimensional and real. The movie is all well and good, but I'm glad we can leave that behind because ultimately that was a very melodramatic sort of soap opera-esque portrayal, which is, I think, exactly what they were going for. This is a human drama that just happens to have a sort of vigilanteism background.
But what I do like about it, King B, as we were getting ready, you said this, what you really like about this, and it struck me too, is that in the Snyder version, the heroes are almost like overpowered. And Alan Moore's original concept for is that Dr. Manhattan was really the only superhero. The rest were just vigilantes out there fighting for justice. And in this, so far in season 1, all our heroes, all the mass vigilantes, just seem like a lower powered Batman, I guess, if that makes sense. And I think that adds to the drama that we're going to be focusing on throughout the series.
Aside from wearing masks and having nicknames, they didn't seem all that special. I mean, you see a little bit of hand-to-hand and some swift moves by Sister Knight, but other characters like Red and Panda and Pirate Jane, they just seem like cops with masks.
Panda's like the ultimate bureaucrat. Like, he is the bureaucratic superhero. I love it. I love how he just sits behind and just quotes the law text.
And it's interesting there that you're going to see this struggle between authoritarianism and this rugged individualism. And you see this come up several times during the show, whether it's police having to radio in to get their firearms released for use, or even, police not having the option to reveal their actual identities and what they do for a living. You can kind of see the argument for both sides. Not that I'm advocating, obviously, white supremacists and white nationalists, but but even the good guys in this world aren't operating in a great place.
The notion that the police have to request to have a firearm released. I'm interested in what happens in this world that causes that sort of thing to be instituted, and looking at parallels between like our current political climate. It's kind of really weird to think about how if one side got what they were after, how the other side, be it police or civilians, would sort of up the ante.
For fans who've never listened, this is just our Instacast. This is just what we're releasing immediately after. We haven't gone back. We haven't watched the show, right? But there's just some things that we want to highlight during this, and then we'll deep dive into it later this week, right, Gene?
Yeah, absolutely, Raj. So the Instacast, again, is our quick take immediately after watching it. We literally just watched the show, hopped on and said, hey, guys, what'd you think? As we discover what each other found interesting about this episode, then we're going to go back and do the research, and then on Tuesday release the full episode. And I have a concern that in an era right now when everyone seems to want TV as an escape or a unifier, we get a lot of feedback from the audience who listens to our podcast, whether it be Westworld or Game of Thrones, that they're looking for escape. They're looking for something to bring people together. And then Watchmen comes along and it's pulling no punches. And I do wonder if this HBO audience, we like to think of this as an advanced, intelligent audience. This show is going to and has already pushed some serious buttons. I'm excited to see where it goes and a little worried that it's going to go too far.
See, I disagree. I think that was one of the things that got me excited is because I had heard that this show was going to have the struggle between race relations. Another thing that got me excited, though, was Ozymandias. The more I watched the movie, Gene, the more I'm intrigued by Ozzy. People like he was clearly the architect of the events in the original storyline, and he's on record when he's dining in his castle with his only friends and apparently lovers, his butler and his maid. He's writing a new play, and this is a completely new storyline. But is he now going to be the architect? It felt like a little foreshadowing was going on there. If there's anyone who gets me excited, it's Jeremy fucking Irons.
Well, there's definitely something weird going on with Ozymandias, and I think that it might be something that kind of develops in parallel to the rest of the show and kind of comes to a head later in the series. But there's just bizarre stuff going on that might suggest that there's something more at play than just a geographical separation. So if you notice when Sister Night is going to her little hideout, her bakery, there's somebody reading a newspaper that basically says that Adrian Veidt is dead or is gone. Mm-hmm. And then when you see Ozymandias, when you see Jeremy Irons, again, people who are watching the show for the first time who did not see the movie, did not read the book, they're like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? The old guy in the fancy pajamas who rides into the castle on horseback. Things are a little weird in this castle. The guy brings him a horseshoe to cut his cake, and then he's like, oh, should I have brought a knife? I'm thinking parallel universe or people that he created. This isn't normal.
Those are genetically created people, I think. Those are sort of automated servants, maybe. The reason he brings a horseshoe is because they are probably programmed beings that just aren't that smart or intelligent. I don't think that they're lovers per se. I think that that's sort of just a cheap thrill they're trying to throw at you. If I'm going to make a prediction, Ozymandias is living in some sort of retreat. He obviously cannot trust people, so he has to grow his own sort of team to assist in whatever his next evil plan may be. At the end of the movies and at the end of the books, it is I guess, supposed that all of his work is undone by the journals of Rorschach, which we know are out there and exist. So clearly something's up.
I think there's factions of the people. Don't you think that that's what they're saying, though? Is that there are people like the factions of Rorschach that have read his musings in the New Frontiersman and are trying to tear down this world that was created and left by Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan, who's still up there on Mars, and there's still fallout from the giant squid.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
I think that's episode 2.
Yeah, maybe people like the Seventh Calvary who wear Rorschach masks. That might be a hint, and even right. Call them Rorschach masks. As we're talking about heroes and villains, one of the characters that really caught my eye, we talked about him on the preview, but Louis Gossett Jr. plays a character called Will Reeves. All we knew about him ahead of time was that he, was somebody with a story and was very old. In this, we see some very interesting appearances. So Will Reeves, the final scene we see him in, he's got Don Johnson, Judd Crawford, strung up by a tree. He's holding a piece of paper that the little boy was holding in Tulsa in 1921 that says, "Take care of my boy." He could be the same guy, but that would make him about 100 years old. But it's possible in this world. And what's interesting is you see him earlier when he interacts with Sister Night outside of her bakery. He asks her if she thinks he could lift 200 pounds. And then you see a man strung up from a tree. there seems to be a little bit of a connection there. Do you guys think that, I mean, I don't get the impression that he's a villain per se, but he might have done something very bad.
So in the coming attraction or in the coming season, I don't know if it was like next episode or just kind of the rest of the season on Watchmen, there is a brief scene of him explaining how old he is, and he is over 100 years old. So it is, I think it's definitely the same boy that we saw originally that opened the show, right? Telling kind of his origin story of escaping. But the noose, I mean, I got to give it to King B, his theory.
Yeah, 100%. It makes sense that he's the Hooded Justice. We know it's got to be the boy from the beginning of the episode. I found that to be a very kind of touching opener, worshiping the old Western of the Bass Reeves in the video. Obviously, it's probably his grandfather or great-grandfather. Something horrible happens to him. He's got that obsession with justice and the law. Yeah, that's Hooded Justice. And if he is in fact responsible for what we see at the end of this episode, then they are going to reveal that there are a lot of factions at play and a lot of moving parts to this story.
Now, getting back to that hanging, of course, Judd Crawford, played by Don Johnson. Raj, you were very excited about the Donnaissance that was going to happen in season. And I wonder, HBO now has shown a proclivity for killing off major actors early on in series. Any opinions on one, if we don't get any more Don Johnson, if this was it, was he an asset to this show? What did you think of his performance? And do you think that there's a possibility he was up to something less than honest?
Yeah, anytime Don Johnson sings Oklahoma, I'm excited. And I think it just really showed his range as an actor. But yeah, I mean, I saw King B, and I think share a love for Don Johnson. I loved him in, what's the show he did with Cheech?
Nash Bridges?
You remember that show? Nash Bridges. No, I thought he was great in Tarantino in Django Unchained. That was, again, if this is the only episode that we get Don Johnson, I thought he was masterful. Obviously, I think everyone kind of knew something was going to happen when he left the house. Whether or not he was going to be in cahoots with the Seventh Calvary, or he was going to be killed and strung up by the Seventh Calvary, I think is kind of an interesting storyline that'll be played out over the season. But I really hope we see more of his character, because I really enjoyed him and I really enjoyed Don Johnson.
And with that mystery possibly solved, I want to get to one last one before we close, guys. Anybody want to take a stab at explaining the reigning squid?
Yeah, absolutely. Our interrogator, Looking Glass, in his series of questions that he's asking the suspect, the Seventh Cavalry suspect, asks if he believes that the squid are a part of a hoax by the government to maintain an illusion of an interdimensional attack. To me, this suggests that this show is borrowing from the graphic novel, where the big attack that's supposed to unite everyone and end all wars is a giant psychic squid. I think it's a great little nod. I'm glad that they brought back the squid. It would make sense maybe that this is sort of just a way to kind of keep people in line, if that was the big event that scared people in the beginning. And I love it. I love squid.
I love when a world makes something so absurd so real and grounded, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, of course there would be air sirens, of course people would stop what they're doing, and then there would be the mundane task of like governmental services that come in and sweep the streets afterwards, because we're humans and we just adapt to our fucking new surroundings.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how much of this seems normal to us by the end of the series. And one of the things I watched with a group of friends, they had a lot of questions. They didn't know what was going on. I don't think that this is a show that's going to leave us guessing forever, but I do think that part of the joy of watching Watchmen on HBO is going to be learning about this world and having it all eventually make sense. There is mystery upon mystery here, a lot like Westworld. But I think that that there are going to be a lot fewer loose ends.
Again, there's a lot of Easter eggs, good ones. Manhattan up on apparently there's a Manhattan video or a live stream that you can go into. There's a whole series that's going to be like a documentary on Minutemen, American Heroes. It looks like it was produced on like A&E or the History Channel. So there's a lot of these good Easter eggs that I think you're going to learn more and more about this rich universe. There was the guy holding the sign that said, instead of "the end is near," it says the future is bright. It's explaining the parallels of, the 1980s version of, we're 15 minutes, or 2 minutes to nuclear destruction versus, everything is good and bright and cheery and put on a happy face, even though underneath it all, there's chaos about to loom. So I'm really excited for this, and I'm excited that people are on board for this.
All right, that concludes this week's episode of Shout on TV Watchmen. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shout on TV. On Facebook, search for Shout on TV Podcast. The website is shoutontv.com. And you can email us with your thoughts on this Instacast at hosts@shoutontv.com. If there's anything we missed that you want to get to our attention so we can consider it for the deep dive, which comes out on Tuesday, please write to us or tweet at us. But you can email hosts@shoutontv.com. Let us know what you're thinking. Again, we're going to take these thoughts, add a bunch more, do our research, and hit you with the actual episode, the quality episode of Shout on TV, which will come out on Tuesday. So you can hear the deep dive there. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. As a reminder, we do have our 6 other podcasts, but this one is young. It is new. It needs your support. So go on and subscribe, share it with a friend, let people know about this great show, Watchmen on HBO, and please leave that 5-star review. That's the best thing you can do to help us grow the podcast. On behalf of my co-host, the King Bee and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Tuesday for the Watchmen Deep Dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.